I'm here today with Jill Price. Jill is from Barrie, Ontario, and Jill is a visual artist. Hi, Jill.
Hi, how are you, Mosh?
Good. So I want to start with you telling us about yourself, your background. Go ahead.
Okay, well, currently I'm living in Barrie, Ontario, as you mentioned, but I actually grew up in Pickering, the suburbia Greater Toronto area.
Mm-hmm.
I actually was born in Scarborough and moved out to Pickering to grow up, which was mostly rural at the time. So I find that interesting because my work has taken a real rural twist today. So you don't necessarily know that your childhood is going to influence your work later in life, but it really has.
Mm-hmm.
While living in Pickering, I was actually more of an athlete. People expected me to become a phys ed teacher. I competed in volleyball and baseball on a provincial and national level. And so when I told people I was going off to art school, they were quite shocked. One sister, and my parents divorced when I was around 12, so that was a challenge. But luckily, I sort of had a mind frame, which an artist has, is that you sort of focus as an artist, and so I was very focused as a child, and I was determined to not let their divorce really affect me as an individual or my goals, and so I was very driven in my athletics and in my aspirations to go to art school and things like that. We did a lot of camping and a lot of skiing, and so both of those things, a lot of hiking, all of our family trips seem to be very outdoorsy, helped me nurture a big connection to the land, and so again, that influences my work. And so anyway, I'm very grateful for that. The childhood experiences that we had as younger people are completely different than today, right? Like unsupervised, mucking around in creeks, no parents around, blowing up rafts that we took from the garage and they didn't know, and almost floated out to Lake Ontario, right? Like it was just, the experience were probably a little more dangerous, but in terms of learning how to make decisions and taking risks as kids, there was a lot more freedom around that. So I went off to the University of Western Ontario in London, Ontario, and I had an amazing group of professors, most of them showing on a national level, some on an international level. So you don't necessarily recognize that while you're there, but when you start to get out in the world and visit galleries all over the world and you see your professors' installations and paintings, holy crow, right? These people knew what they're talking about.
Right.
Or they didn't know what they were talking about. They were some of their own work, right? I had a professor who told me I couldn't paint. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of paying $5,000 a year here, so you think you're going to teach me? But, our university was more about teaching us how to think. And so the application of those thought processes were those skills you had to develop on your own.
One of the things that I really connected to your artwork the first time I saw it was, and this is probably in your recent work, was the squares. Because this is also something that I've been connected to and using in my artwork. Tell me a bit about that, and also about your current work, because it's not only the squares. There is a lot going on in your paintings right now.
Layers, right?
So,
well, the pixelation started with my Rural Transition show last January, and I was through the GPS and Google Earth. I was actually taking snapshots of little country roads where you were beginning to see suburban entities enter their environment. And I love the idea that, first of all, I am documenting our landscape through Google Earth. Like, who would have ever thought, right? So that whole body of work was about how our landscapes are changing, how we're acquiring them, how we're working them, how we're viewing them, how we're documenting them. All that's changing because of technology. So I was documenting these interesting little country corners where all of a sudden you'd see like Tim Hortons on it. And I'm like, what is this? It's a quaint little town, and then there's this giant Tim Hortons drive-thru on the corner of it. And rather than that little beautiful town becoming a landmark, the Tim Hortons has become the landmark. Because now everybody's driving, oh, there's a Tim Hortons in Thornton. Well, it's not there. You know what I mean? Thornton is no longer the landmark. It's these sort of gigantic commercial, what do you call it, when they're franchises that becoming landmarks for us.
Right.
So, so I started to document these corners and think of, okay, well, what would those have been? What would that have represented back in a rural lifestyle, right? So I entitled the one where Tim Hortons is on the corner of Thornton. You see the country landscape and then this giant Tim Hortons, and I called it Afternoon Tea. And you know how people would go to each other's farm and have a civil afternoon tea and actually communicate, right? Rather than driving through to get somewhere really quickly. And where the Tim Hortons meets the landscape, I pixelated that to talk about the industrialization of our landscape. This is sort of creeping in, this technology is creeping into an old way of life. And so I did 4 of those. One was called Dairy, and it showed Dairy Queen on the corner of a little country area. And then there was this picnic table at the side of a gas station in Mitchell, Ontario. And I remember as a kid, my parents would pull into those picnic areas with like warm tuna salad sandwiches and warm milk, and we'd have lunch, right? Well, now this picnic table is at the side of a Max Milk attached to a petrol can.
And you also use other media in it. You use in photography. It's a mixed media. Using stitches as well.
Yeah. So from those works, the rural transitions have come my rural ideas, and and again, it's documenting sort of so starting with a photograph, photo-based mixed media painting ultimately. Starting with this natural canvas, which would have been our natural landscape, documenting it through photography, pixelating the area where the industrialization meets the natural landforms or natural habitats, and then working into those pixelated areas with fabric is a little bit about mending, trying to mend these landscapes that we're being careless with. So this very ritualistic sewing into the canvas. Then I paint the rest with the plastic, heavy acrylic, right, which again represents industrialization. So those little pockets of fabric represent some hope within that industrialization. Right? And we see that happen in the food movement, the raw food movement, the organic food movement, the local food movement. So all of those are little pockets of hope within our mass production, consumption society.
Right, right.
Yeah. And then on top, I do stamping. So with my lino cuts, I carve little creatures or things that would be left, like footprints or feathers, things that are organic from creatures that would have lived in those natural habitats or been part of those ecosystems.
What is artistic success for you? How do you define it? What do you see it? Do you see it already successful, or is it a long process?
My ultimate goal is to get representation to the point where I don't need to go out and teach anymore. I don't need to go out and do workshops anymore. I don't need to do part-time curatorial work anymore. I'm in my studio working full-time, having people working for me to get my name and my work out there. That's what I want, right? That's what I want to be. Every time I need to leave my studio, that is stunting my growth in my production. And so that's my goal. That will be my ultimate success when all I need to do is the artwork.
Yes.
Now, if that ever happens, I don't know, because I've met extremely successful artists who are continually doing those other things. And I'm like, really? You still have to do that? Oh my God, you know, like they're in their 60s. And I'm like, I'm tired now. You know, so it's, anyway, I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that I get there. Yeah.
Well, I've met you earlier this week, and the level of energy I saw coming out of you was amazing. So I'm sure you will.
I hope so. Yeah, you know, and so you make these small steps, And yes, you do. You have to celebrate each one of them.
One last question. Any number one tip of something that you've learned in your artistic endeavors that you would like to share?
No matter who comes in or approaches you or talks to you, treat everyone equal, because you never know who you're dealing with.
Right.
And so if you can treat everyone with the same level of respect and interest, you're bound to get far.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that is sort of a golden rule of when you're trying to sell yourself and get out there, is that everyone is a potential client, everyone can potentially help you, and so treat everyone the same.
Thank you so much, Jill, and I'm sure you will have lots of success. Your art is beautiful, and you know the level of energies are great. So lots of luck.
I get that from doing what I love, though. Right?
Good. Yes.
You get your energy, you're able to do what you love.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is another message for everyone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.